Thank you so much for having me here today. Um, my name is Krista Varady. I'm a professor of nutrition at the University of Illinois in Chicago. I've been studying intermittent fasting for the past 15 years or so. We've done probably about 22 clinical trials now with thousands of people. So I just wanted to summarize some of our current evidence for time-restricted feeding. And thanks so much, Dr. Baldry. That was a great talk. I probably should have shared some of my slides with you beforehand because some of the information is a little conflicting. The fasting researchers get together every 2 years at a fasting conference, and these are the definitions that we came up with. So just to kind of clarify, and I'm sorry if some of these are different from her talk. So what we came up with as the group of scientists studying fasting was that intermittent fasting is actually an umbrella term for 3 different types of diets. The first one is alternate day fasting. That one, I'd have to say, is not super popular. That's when you have the kind of fast day alternated with a feast day. So that diet really flip-flops, like feast day, fast day, feast day, fast day. On the fast day, people tend to consume about 500 or 600 calories, or alternatively, you could just do water only fast on that day. It's really your choice. On the feast day, people are truly allowed to do whatever they want. So we thought, one of the things about this diet is that, you get that break every other day off dieting. So we thought maybe people would, find that a little easier than maybe traditional dieting. The second form of intermittent fasting is the 5-2 diet, which I know in the UK became very popular after Michael Bosley's documentary about, I think that was 2013. So the 5-2 diet is like a spin-off of alternate day fasting. And then that would involve 2 days of fasting. That's where the 2 comes from. And then 5 feast days. And then the third type of intermittent fasting, which is really become quite popular now in the US, is time-restricted feeding or time-restricted eating. And as Dr. Baldry mentioned, that's when you eat within a certain window of time each day. So, that can range anywhere from like 4 to 12 hours or so. But I'd say probably the most popular one in the US is, sorry, I can't speak for the UK. I'm not sure of the trends there just yet, but I guess we can discuss it. As the 8-hour window or the 6-hour window. And just to kind of get a bit more detail about what you do with these diets. So really, you pick what window you want with time-restricted feeding. A lot of people will pick that 8-hour window. Then you pick where you want it in the day. And I think we'll talk about this in the panel discussion, but from what I've seen with the data and from what we've generated from our lab, it's definitely healthier to place the window earlier in the day. Our bodies are a lot more insulin sensitive in the morning. So that means that our bodies can put away sugar a lot more easily in the morning. And then as the day goes on, our bodies can't process sugar that well. So eating more in the morning is definitely healthier for you. So if you can put that 8-hour window, say like starting at 8 a.m. or whenever you have your breakfast, that's wonderful. But from a clinical standpoint and just looking at just being realistic, honestly, what we found from running thousands of people through intermittent fasting trials is that people do not like to miss dinner time. That's when people socialize with friends and family, like after work drinks, dinner with your family, that type of thing. If you make people miss dinner, they're not going to do the diet. That's when we get a lot of dropouts, when we make them eat earlier. So we usually try to capture dinner within our time-restricted feeding window. So what we noticed 5 years ago, my students and I, was that time-restricted feeding was definitely becoming really popular. For some reason, there was already 30 books in bookstores on this, but there was 0 studies on whether or not it actually worked for weight loss. 0 5 years ago. So another thing I should point out right away, there's actually only 5 clinical trials to date that have looked at whether or not time-restricted feeding works for weight loss. So very little evidence. All of them are 2 to 3 months long. They involve 50 people, etc. So please keep that in mind. It's a very new field. So when we saw this, we were like, it's a popular diet. We should probably figure out, does it actually work for weight loss in individuals with obesity? So in, I believe it was 2016-17, my students and I ran this trial. So the first kind of weight loss study of time-restricted feeding. And what we did was we took people with obesity, otherwise healthy, and we randomized them to either a control group or a time-restricted feeding group. The time-restricted feeding group, it was that 8-hour diet I was talking about. And we chose 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. again, because we wanted to capture dinner, but we thought, at 10 a.m. they could probably squeeze in like breakfast, have a lunch, and then dinner. And then fasting from 6 p.m. to 10 a.m. During the fasting window, I always get a lot of questions. Well, what can people do during that window? Is it really just water fasting? We usually allow people to drink like black coffee and black tea. We also permit like diet sodas, but just 2 max, because it can increase sugar craving. And then the control group was just usual diet, and the study ran for 3 months. So one of the coolest parts about time-restricted feeding, which really sets it apart, I think, from calorie restriction, is that you don't need to measure, you don't need to quantify or record your calories every day. Like what I noticed in running weight loss trials is people get so sick of calorie restriction diets because they have to like constantly monitor their calories in like an app or a food record, what have you. But time-restricted feeding, all you have to do is like pick a window of time you want to eat, where you want to put it, and you do not need to count calories. You start eating when your window starts. You stop eating when the window stops. And that's it. And as Dr. Baldry was saying, that actually produces kind of a natural, unintentional calorie restriction. And I'll show you the numbers for that in a second. So the first question we asked was, well, can people stick to this diet? Dr. Sachin Panda ran a beautiful study in 2015 where they tried to figure out, well, what's a usual eating window for a typical person? And if this was live, I would ask the audience, what do you think it is? It's about 14 hours. So we eat for a total stretch of 14 hours every day. And we actually don't have many meal patterns in there. We eat every like 1 to 2 hours. It's actually a little depressing, but we're just constantly eating 14 hours. So what happens if you cut out 6 hours and just go right to 8? Can people do that? Because, you're cutting out a lot of eating hours. We found that, yeah, people could. They stuck to that 8-hour window 6 out of 7 days per week. And if they did skip a day, it was typically on a Saturday where they couldn't do the 8-hour window just because, like socializing and stuff like that. So the weight loss we saw wasn't that great. It was only 2.6%, 3 kilograms. In general, with alternate day fasting in our previous trials, we saw greater weight loss with that, so closer to 5 kilograms after 3 months. Here again, just 3 kilograms. But the coolest part that we kind of discovered is that by limiting that window to 8 hours, people naturally cut out about 350 calories from their diet. So again, without calorie counting, which is I think that's one of the best clinical features of this diet. Change in metabolic risk, didn't see that much, honestly, just a small decrease in systolic blood pressure. I think the reason that their plasma lipids and glucose levels and stuff like that didn't change was because they were pretty healthy at baseline. For clinicians out there, you can kind of see those values are pretty normal. They also didn't lose that much weight. You usually need to lose about 5% weight to see these things change. So I was asked to talk about safety with these diets. So we do assess safety in all of our trials. And for the 8-hour time-restricted feeding study, we really found no differences in a lot of the key measures of safety we look at. So, we look at like people are worried about becoming like constipated or feeling like dry mouth is a big thing with these diets that people are worried about. But we haven't seen any changes in those over the course of like short-term studies. Same with kind of like neurological effects. The main thing I would say is that these diets, it takes 10 days to get used to intermittent fasting. So whatever diet you try, first 10 days are rough. You just have to like deal with it. You are going to feel a bit hangry. You're going to be a bit irritable. But then after 10 days, a lot of that stuff tends to go away in the majority of our subjects. So, and in general, from baseline, if we measure baseline to post-treatment, we don't see many changes. Another question we get is, well, I used to get it a lot more. Wouldn't intermittent fasting produce eating disorders in people? There was a lot of concern about, are people going to develop eating disorders if all of a sudden they're fasting throughout parts of the day? So we run validated questionnaires, and we found that with alternate day fasting and time-restricted feeding, it doesn't increase someone's propensity to develop eating disorders. However, I do have to say, we do screen out people with a history of eating disorders. I don't really think these diets are for that population. So just to summarize, if people do not have a history, it doesn't increase their propensity for eating disorders. We've also run a bunch of different sleep studies. So just to summarize very quickly here, in general, I know I don't have that much time left, so I'll just kind of say it quickly, but intermittent fasting, it doesn't improve sleep from what we've seen, but it doesn't negatively affect it either. So this is data on like sleep quality and like if we tease apart good sleepers and poor sleepers or just pool everyone together, we don't actually see sleep really change. So we've also measured other things like insomnia severity, risk of obstructive sleep apnea. Intermittent fasting tends to have no beneficial effects, but it also doesn't have any negative effects on sleep. So people aren't gonna like have worse sleep quality or not be able to fall asleep. So yeah, just generally, that's what we've seen. So for 8 hours, we saw, you know, kind of like mild weight loss, I'd say. People can stick to it, but no major effects really for metabolic risk. So the next question we had, let me just check my time. Okay, got to be pretty quick on this one. So we wanted to know if you shorten that window to 4 to 6 hours, are you going to see more weight loss? So we ran another study where it was a 4-hour group versus 6 hours versus controls. And we found that we placed it in the afternoon, these windows, so 3 to 7 p.m. and 1 to 7 p.m. We found that weight loss, you know, this is just a 2-month study. So we saw about a 3-kilogram weight loss over 2 months with these shorter windows. There was no difference between the 4-hour and 6-hour group. So this is all to say, you know, you don't really need to torture yourself and like minimize that window down to 4. The 6-hour group seems to produce the same amount of weight loss. We did see some preferential changes in like glucoregulatory factors. So insulin went down with both 4 and 6. Insulin resistance also went down. And then we also saw some some decreases in oxidative stress. So 8-isoprostane is a marker of oxidative stress to lipids. And we did see that go down with both diets as well. And then with this one, I think the most impressive thing is that, yeah, we did see that unintentional calorie restriction again, this time with those shorter windows. So last time I said it was 350 for 8 hours. So for 4 and 6 hours, it's about the same, and it's roughly 550, which is, again, for someone who runs weight loss trials and tries to help people with weight loss, this is incredible. Like trying to cut 500 calories out of your diet regularly is extremely difficult. So now that we have this new tool, time restricted feeding, you just, you know, decide to eat in whatever window and you could cut out anywhere from 300 to 500 calories. I think clinically it's astounding. So I'd say 4-hour and 6-hour, you get slightly faster weight loss. I think it's a little harder to do. We did see pretty good adherence with this, no safety issues as well. But we did actually see some metabolic things move. So we saw decreases in insulin, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress, but no effect on like lipids or inflammation. And very quickly, just to summarize, so I know that the question in the last talk was, is fasting better for weight loss compared to traditional dieting? So we ran a study looking at if alternate day fasting over a year produces better weight loss than calorie restriction. And we thought, honestly, people could probably stick to alternate day fasting better because you get that day off of dieting every other day. Turns out we were wrong. It was very depressing. We like ran this study for like 5 years. Millions of dollars went into it. And the answer is no. Alternate day fasting and calorie restriction, so fasting and traditional dieting seem to produce the same amount of weight loss. We are currently running a similar trial design, so a year to see if time-restricted feeding produces more weight loss or the same amount of weight loss as calorie restriction. We hope to publish this data. Hopefully in about a year or so. We're kind of fast-tracking this because of the interest right now in these diets. So I just want to thank all of my students. They ran all these trials. They're wonderful, PhD students and postdocs. And then also just acknowledge that funding was provided by National Institutes of Health, American Heart Association, and International Life Sciences Institute. Thank you so much.